Oh shit.
Oh, that's a great
There they are. Hey.
Okay.
And make it look like it does.
Like I'm not here.
Pass, like he's not here, and then cut it to this three-way thing.
just like the literary world. We just act like Clint's not here.
That's it.
All right. Shall we do this? Let's get started.
Yep.
I'm excited.
I didn't write you a roasty bio today.
Oh, how the tables have turned, Kate.
I felt bad the last time.
I only have, mine's not even really roasty. I was just gonna, so I guess we could get started. Welcome to Table For Deuce, episode 5. With me, as always, is Kate Hanson Foster, who can be described as sonnet in the streets and free verse in the sheets. And welcome, Kate Hanson Foster.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, okay. Thank you. And I'm with my pal, writer friend. Who are you?
It's Mark Schmeltzer. Why did you blank on my name? How dare you? After
Kate Hanson, your name. Your name. I can't figure out how to say your name. I'm here with Michael Schmeltzer, author of Empire of Surrender, award-winning author, and Blood Song is another one of his books. And since I didn't write anything down, I don't have anything else to say. And so therefore, that is all I have to say about you at this time. I have something I want to talk about.
Yeah. I'm
really, really excited for tonight. Actually, I almost made popcorn for the podcast because I you know how I like to fall down internet holes, and
that's your thing. Yep.
So in my non-prep for this show, I fell down another QAnon hole today because Trump is going to make his big announcement. I'm so excited. I wrote down, where are my notes? I wrote down some things that they were saying because the QAnon people are still at it. Okay, so nothing could stop.
JFK Jr. is for real going to come back this time.
Everyone thinks that the announcement is just too grand, so it can't just be that he's running again. So it must be that JFK Jr. is his running mate. The storm is coming.
Oh my gosh.
Which I don't know if there was a winter weather advisory in my area overnight, so I don't know what they mean by the storm, but the storm is coming.
Yeah.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. Drain the swamp.
And the military is going to come out with him and announce that 2020 the election was a fraud and that he has been the rightful president.
Yeah.
Whole time.
That seems really likely. Yeah. We have such a great episode today. I'm so excited to get started with this episode. Not only do we have our very first guest of the show, we also have some feedback from an anonymous listener.
Feedback.
Oh, you didn't tell me this. I didn't.
Our fan, obviously a fan of the show. Has been paying attention. But they have some things to say about that Chen Chen poem, which I would love to read. The Morling poem is way the hell better than Chen Chen writing about shit and acting like it's somehow worthy of my time. His audacity to incite in the poems those who are grossed out are his enemies is both an act in othering those who feel differently and arrogance. It's poem insurance, a ridiculous sleight of hand, slight, I believe misspelled there, but that's fine. Sleight of hand and an elementary form of bravery. There's nothing brave about talking about your shit. Adam Sandler already did it in the 90s. On top of that, the poem is not steeped in music play and flat lines, often into textureless prose. If I want to hear about shit, which I don't, I'll ask a doctor who specializes in it. Since Chen did nothing to procure my adoration, nor my ongoing attention.
Lengthy feedback.
I get that is lengthy feedback on a poem and strangely angry. I don't understand.
It kind of reminds me of when we were talking about whether or not the poet's identity is necessary in order to interpret the poem adequately. Like we mentioned, there was that student who was Asian, and that poem kind of invoked feelings about her own body and her own like Asianness and things like that. And so this is kind of similar, where this feels like more like a critique against the poet than the poem itself, because
there are things I don't understand. I don't quite get the arrogance from this. Nothing feels less arrogant than a poem saying that you shit your pants or you shit the bed. That seems the least arrogant thing I could possibly think of for a poem.
Is this commenter a white supremacist? Because the only the only critique or like the thing that, you know, in terms of othering that I felt was happening in that poem was you know, the right-wing media and the white supremacy kind of drivel on television.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting bouquets. I'm getting notes of aggrieved white man. You know, there's little hints of jealousy. Like, I don't know what's going on. It just seems strangely personal. We talked a lot about the music of the poem, so I kind of don't get the lines going out into textureless prose. Like, I don't quite get the critique.
There's something that we also talked about, you know, that the idea of true love being something really ugly in a lot of ways, and sometimes grotesque too, which I think is why the poop is such a heavy, gross image to come like slap you in the face right at the beginning. But I didn't see that more as like attack. Like I'm specifically writing this poem to attack my enemies by like slinging poop at them. You know, like,
yeah, exactly. And it's like the way they phrase it, Chen Chen writing about shit. I mean, it's like subject versus theme here. It's like, yeah, they're shit in it and it is about shit, but it's also about so much more than that. So I'm not sure what is going on, to be honest. But let's I think now is a great time to bring in our first guest to see. I know they've listened to the first episode. I know they read that Chen Chen poem. So our first guest is the author of the newly released book of poems Visitor and the novel Lying Bastard, as well as 2 other books of poems. Please welcome the highly esteemed Clint Margrave to the show.
Hi, Clint.
Hooray! Hi,
Wow,
Clint.
I feel like I've hit the big time.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Clint, you've read the poem, you heard the critique. I don't know, thoughts. Like you tend to be more towards a I would say like a narrative writer. Your poetry is very narrative. It's steeped kind of in stories and these observations. I wouldn't say you're a lyric poet per se, but there are definitely moments of lyricism in your poems. What do you think? I mean, do you notice musicality in the Chen poem? What do you think about the critique?
I have a problem with critiquing even the fact that it's if it is about shit. So what? You know, shit is part of life. These are things of life, right? Poems are not meant to just be about the moon and butterflies, and so I think it's a fair topic if that is a topic. And of course, like, as you said, it's a love poem. It's a love poem that involves shit. I mean, you can't get, Kate already mentioned the grotesque element of that, and I think that's what makes it kind of beautiful.
There is definitely a very sly craft at work here that is holding the reader's attention, I think, and that you're moving from each line to the next in a very careful way, and it keeps you until the very end, and then you get to this really sweet moment.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful end, that poem.
It is a beautiful shit sandwich, basically, where you have the two ends that somehow become this beautiful thing. Oh, and I was talking to Lydia. Lydia has been watching the show, and she has a theory on platonic tube.
Oh,
so she
Now that
was.
I did take issue with that. I agree.
it's a weird line.
She likes the parallel between platonic tube and then immediately going into like my partner and I are not platonic. So she sees the parallel, like kind of the parallels between those two things and what leaves the body, which is so strangely intimate, but also like has that kind of withdrawing thing, like we're getting rid of stuff. So there's this thing that is like deep inside of us that is platonic, but is also, like Clint had mentioned, kind of a daily part of everybody's life. And well, hopefully daily if you're regular. But then you have this completely separate human being that can have this intimacy, that even though they are separate, that there is that non-platonic, that connection. So I thought that was an interesting thing she thought of. So obviously we should have her on the show. She's smarter than all of us, I think.
Yeah. And we should also mention too that I don't want to discourage feedback, just even if we're pushing back on our feedback, because I love that someone had thoughts on it and that shared it with us.
Yeah, and especially strong thoughts. I mean, that's what we're all about. Like I love that reaction, and I encourage more of the back and forth. I do think I would love it if they weren't anonymous. But also I get it. I get it. People feel more comfortable, behind a mask saying their truths than in front of people. It can be a little vulnerable, and I think me and Kate go through that at times. And Clint, I don't know if you've ever said anything vulnerable in public like that. So you're. I do want to thank the listener for actually listening and giving us some feedback. I am sad that you didn't like that poem, because I love that poem. I thought it was great, but maybe one day you can recommend a poem and we'll check it out and see what you're into if you're not into shit poems. So
yeah, and I think the poetry prose debate, I find that can be a little just disingenuous. And I mean, I personally think the best prose is musical anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really like that divide very much. Probably because I'm not that kind of writer anyway, but and probably because I write across genres, so I write poems, I write stories and all that. So
no, I would love to hear some poems from the new book. So I think that would be a great way to transition.
I don't think I have any with shit in them. But, maybe some shit. But anyway, let's I have one with God. So we can start with that. I don't know if that's going to be acceptable, but so this first poem is called Once I Shared a Wall with God, dedicated to my old neighbors who were loud and inspired this. So. Once I shared a wall with God. I could hear him vacuuming late at night. Who does that? He was constantly rearranging furniture, opening and closing drawers, sliding hangers in the closet, banging things around. I never really heard his voice because he lived alone. Occasionally, just the deep rumble of him clearing his throat. It's not his fault, I told myself. The walls are thin. These floors crack at every step. The rooms are echo chambers. I can adjust. In the morning, it was silent. God liked sleeping in. But at night, I cursed the world until I finally had to confront him. I thought about leaving a letter to spare us both the awkward conversation, but I wanted to make sure he understood. I'll be nice, I said as I rang his bell, but if it keeps on happening, I'll have to tell the landlord. Nervous as I was, I wanted God to know he'd been a bad neighbor, that he had little regard for others, that this universe was something we both shared. I'm sorry, I wanted to hear him say. I'm so sorry. But nobody answered the door.
It is great. So I finished your book this morning. I read through it, and I've told you this before too. You are a king of endings. You are so good at ending a poem, and I think visually sometimes the way I picture your poems working is like in an hourglass shape, where you have this kind of funneling down toward this great ending, and then where it expands back into the bottom half is like what it leaves us with. Like your poems ending always kind of expand in my brain in a way that not every poem can. And I think you are so good at leaving this very kind of understated ending.
The end is just like, it does. It just brings it's minimal and it's in language, but brings up so much in the larger picture. And we've said this before because we fan over Clint all the time. that last lines always make us kind of return back to the top and go again. And that's like, you know, the best poems do.
And it never
I knew I came on the show for a reason.
Yeah, and the endings too, they never feel forced. That's the thing. They manage to surprise me. And I look back and I'm like, how did I not see that coming? I feels like it feels so organic. And I feel like it was leading me there this whole time. I should have been able to predict this, but I never can. So I love that quality about your work, is that it's not ornamental. There isn't anything in there that is making me look at you, the author. It's just, I'm completely in the poem. Would you like to read another for us?
Sure. Yeah, I'll read this one. This is called On the Banks of the Danube. And the title kind of runs into the first line, so I'll reread that. On the banks of the Danube, they found the young mother's body, and all I could think about were the fields of sunflowers that went on for miles when I traveled through Bulgaria last summer. The red roofs of village houses, the shopkeepers that sat smoking together on busy streets in perfectly timed cigarette breaks, the devoted young friends I made staging art exhibits in the center of cities, the father who kept kissing the cheek of his disabled daughter each time he wiped the drool from her mouth, the boy ringing the bell on his bicycle, the parents who carried their paraplegic son onto a raft in the Black Sea so he could swim with his brothers and sisters, the melon ice cream in the park on Saturday, the little girl running across grass in bright pink pants shouting, "Mamo, Mamo."
Once again, the beginning to that ending, where I think you're going to go one way. I think it's going to be so dark because you just begin with that image of the young mother's body, and then it goes elsewhere completely in a way that this is, I would say, the most hopeful poem that has begun with a body I think I've ever read. Let's put it that way. Like it's very something is so genuinely like appreciative just to be alive, just to be looking at these things and observing these people in a way that is just, it makes you kind of stop. And I just, like I said, once again, it gets to the ending where it kind of opens me up in a way that I was not expecting.
When we were talking about poetry and observation a couple of weeks ago, I think, this reminds me so much of that. It's very pictorial, I guess, in the way that it just sort of captures like little snapshots of images. And again, it's, you know, I don't want to keep going back to modernism and this, you know, no ideas but in things, but by, you know, giving the reader these images, it opens up larger conversations that happen as a result of what you're being presented in the poem. This is like, I mean, do you feel like you're influenced by modernism?
Yeah, I would say so for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not as directly, you know, it's not like I read everything by William Carlos Williams all the time or anything like that, but I think indirectly I'm definitely influenced by that, and the simplicity of the language sometimes, and the focus on image. And
I have a question about the book as a whole. So I was looking at the table of contents, and it's just literally alphabetical order. Like, do you think of ordering a manuscript, or are you just like, nope, sort alphabet?
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's really, I actually love that.
Yeah, this is the first time I've done it, but I don't read poetry books from beginning to end. I skim, I jump through them, and we're in this time now where every book is themed, or every book, has, you know, is really a focus on the book, I think, because of contests and things like that. And it's
Mhm.
easy for publishers to sort of look for that. But for me, I've always been old school in that way. I just like books that are just collections of individual poems, and I think of them that way. This actually happened on accident. I did try to do some order for my last two books, but this time I was sending them to somebody actually to sort of look over, and hopefully I was hoping they might just organize it for me, so I wouldn't have to do anything. And I was loading up files, just alphabetically the poems that were going to go into it, and this person mistakenly thought, you know, that was the order, and then I read it and I thought, why not, you know, and
Yeah.
so I did that, and I actually did try to change the order numerous times, and for some reason the alphabetical order just worked, still kept working for me. You know, I find it boring if a book's organized too thematically. You know, these are all the poems about death, these are all the poems about
Mhm.
love, or, you know, I find that there's an interesting uh, thing that can happen when it's a little more random like that. I don't write that way. I don't write poems
Mhm.
thinking, okay, this is my next book's going to be centered around this, you know. And so all the
Mhm.
poems, I just write individual poems, and after 5 years or so, I go, oh, I have, you know, I have a bunch of poems. All right, let's do a book. Let's try to make a book.
I agree with you, Clint. I mean, I really like books that kind of are just a collection of poems. There are so many thematic books, and I even like made it a personal goal of my own to if I write another book of poems, that I won't
Mhm.
be so hung up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a difference. Like some books are purposely thematic. Other books, of course, you know, whenever you have a title, even this book, you know, I thought, okay, visitor, right? A lot of
Mhm.
different things could fall under that category, you know. But yeah, I mean, certainly a title can be some kind of umbrella for many themes, you know, whether they're operating on a metaphoric level or not. You know, I tried it before. I
Yeah.
tried to write. Uh, I did a whole manuscript about poems about my father and his death and all that. And I'm glad I ended up at some point just saying screw that and taking the best poems from that and just
Mhm.
putting them into other collections. I think it's better because I think if I had done that, it just after a while it just too much of the same thing over and over.
So I remember once Marvin Bell saying, like, someone had asked about ordering a book of poems, and he's like, you just throw up all the pages in the air, grab them off the floor, and there you have a manuscript. And he's like, someone will find connecting threads. And I mean,
Mhm.
you can't escape your own brain. You are going to kind of obsess over certain things and create these connections subconsciously or whatnot. Like you said, I mean, I can find definite threads if I want to in this book as well. So it's not like, even with the alphabetical ordering, that wasn't necessarily a conscious ordering per se, still has a kind of story
I,
throughout. And one of
sorry,
I have to say
you
this because I'm
all
so excited about it. When
I,
I was reading Running into Zadie Smith at Albertsons, and I was like, oh, that reminds me of the Ginsberg poem where he meets Whitman, I think, in the grocery store.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and then two poems later, you have the supermarket in California after Allen Ginsberg, and I'm like, that's perfect.
I didn't notice the whole the alphabetical thing, but now like I love that now I know that because everything about this book from the front to the back which we talked
Mm-hmm.
about last week is so bare bones, and it's kind of, you know, so having it be kind of orderless, you know, and no blurbs and all that, I think is makes it holistically just kind of really work, you know? You can
Thanks.
picture
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I think more and more, I think I just like the focus to be on the poems and
Mm-hmm.
not the hype, not any marketing, not, you know, and as far as the blurbs go, I don't know, why do we put blurbs on our actual book? You know, it's like, I think some, you know, we've talked about before maybe that, well, so many blurbs are so full of shit, right? But also, like, why do we stick them on the actual book, you know, the object itself, you know, and you don't see that on records, right? You know, you don't see blurbs on the back of an album, you know. The album is
Mm-hmm.
its own sort of work of art. I did it on my last poetry book too. No blurb
Mm-hmm.
for that. And plus, you know, it's just like, you know, we've said a lot of times they're just fake. or even they're not fake, they're just, I don't know.
I mean, I haven't been influenced to buy a book from a blurb ever. I will always flip through the book, and if the poetry captures me, then I will buy it. If it doesn't,
Exactly.
I won't, no matter what someone says on the back.
Because
Yeah.
the people who would probably give you a more genuine one, they're probably not the famous people, or
Yeah.
that they would probably write the better blurb, but they're
Mhm.
not the name. So
Yeah.
people just want the name on there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I've written them, as you guys have, I'm sure, and I think we
Mhm.
talked about this before, that it often becomes about the person writing the blurb. It's like becomes your own challenge to write.
I want a multiple choice. I will write a blurb, and then you will have 5 options and try to figure out which book I'm talking about. I bet you the answers will be all over. I bet you won't be able to tell what book I'm talking about.
Right.
I think we've done some great discussions on Clint's work. I think we've roasted blurbs in general. And I think, speaking of roasting, I am ready to, or maybe toasting, I am ready to talk about Simply Lit by Malena Morling. So
Okay.
Clint, if you would do us the honors, this was your poem you nominated for us.
All right. Simply Lit. Often toward evening, after another day, after another year of days, in the half dark on the way home, I stop at the food store, and waiting in line, I begin to wonder about people. I wonder if they also wonder about how strange it is that we are here on the earth, and how in order to live, we all must sleep, and how we have beds for this unless we are without, and entire rooms where we go at the end of the day to collapse. And I think how even the most lively people are desolate when they are alone, because they too must sleep and sooner or later die. We are always looking to acquire more food for more great meals. We have to have great meals. Isn't it enough to be a person buying a carton of milk, a simple package of butter, and a loaf of whole wheat bread? Isn't it enough to stand here while the sweet middle aged cashier rings up the purchases? I look outside, but I can't see much out there, because now it is dark, except for a single vermilion neon sign floating above the gas station, like a miniature temple simply lit against the night.
The poem that you actually just read, the on the banks of the Danube, actually reminded me of this poem as well. Just this kind of listing of observations and ideas. I would say your poem was even more bare bones than this one, but I get like I feel like it's pulled kind of from the same muse or inspiration in a way.
Interesting, because I'd never read this until long after that.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't, but it's like I said, it feels like they're both pulling from the same kind of impulse. There's that simplicity of kind of writing style, if you will. There's nothing ornamental, even though the details that Morling chooses are ones that really do evoke like emotion and feeling for me.
One reason this poem I was drawn to it, kind of what you said, I think we're always drawn to poems that we would want to write, and we read and we write the way we want, we write as readers. So I think I write poems maybe in a way that like a poem I'd want to read. And so when I read this, I think for the first time, no doubt, that's probably why it struck me so much. It felt like something I would aspire to. The simplicity of the language is something I always, I tend to be a fairly plain spoken kind of writer. The clarity of the images and just the clarity of the voice and the calmness of the voice. Um, and the way that it can talk about something profound in a simple way, which I always think is the most important element of a good writer. This is the opposite of academia, right? Academia does the opposite. It talks about simple things in this like highfalutin, totally complex way, but without really getting across. So I'm always impressed by writers that can do that, can just through very simple language say something meaningful. And she retains mystery too. People might criticize like simple language sometimes. I feel like that's an amateur move when they do. But there's different types of simplicity, right? There's there's a simplicity of like a young student's work. That's a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother level. And something like this, which is just so meaningful and profound and done through just very simple language. And so this just appealed to me, and I love the end. I just think it's just a strong end.
I got a little hung up a little bit, often towards the evening after another day of days of another one, and then waiting in line, and it just kind of rambles a little. So I felt like the beginning was a little rambly, but then as I got more into it, like I got what the poet was trying to do in terms of just sort of relaying what just the monotony of human life. I don't know, didn't like T.S. Eliot say something like that, poems should abandon monotony, and that they should have that a good poem has the like right amount of tension between repetition and an element of difference and surprise. And I think that's what this poem does so well, because first I got really caught up with the accumulation of time, the accumulation of groceries, all that kind of stuff. But all things, and like to me this poem was about mortality and about death, and so when you get to that final image of the neon sign lit like a temple against the sky, it's when we think of the sky, we think of death. That's kind of like a universal thing. I think that the sky kind of symbolizes death in a lot of ways. And just like, when we die, like all poems must also end. Like there is no, nature can go on, right? Like nature is repetitive. We have seasons, we have time. It's the human mind that creates around that monotony.
Yeah, I mean that for me, that's exactly how I see it too. Is it's about death, and is it enough just to be a person buying a carton of milk? We have all these desires, all these grandiose things. Why can't it just be enough? Anyway, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Like I agree with Kate a little bit at the beginning. Like there is that kind of often toward evening after another day, there is that kind of repetition, and I wasn't exactly sure where it was going. But by the end, I was pretty sold on this poem, and I really like the image at the end, that miniature temple, and it's that neon sign, and it's like you have these things that feel very holy, but there is no mention of God, there is no mention of afterlife. There's this kind of almost like kind of atheistic spirituality to this poem that I really enjoy. It's like you had brought up, isn't it enough to be a person buying a carton of milk? Like this life and our experiences, that can be enough in a way. And the one line that I think is my favorite is the line about, and how in order to live we all must sleep, and how we have beds for this unless we are without, and entire rooms where we go at the end of the day to collapse. It's just making something that we do every day into something strange. Like I've never thought about it that way, but having this room where we go to collapse, it is a bizarre thing when you start thinking about it too much. And I love that this poem can make these everyday things seem more grand and more strange than I've ever given them credit for.
I think that choice to say entire rooms, for some reason that just makes me think like, it's not just a room. We all know, like you think of that, it makes you think like, wow, it is like an entire room just to sleep, like we devote. I just think that choice of entire, who says entire?
I think it goes again to this idea that, sleep and food, like these are just survival things. Like at their most basic level, we need sleep to survive. We need food to survive. It's a human instinct to create the bedroom for, we build around these natural things that are existing, that just, it's just life. And we need to have the big, the bedrooms with the bed in it and the whole sleep ritual. We need to make our food beautiful, you know, having this idea, like she says it many times, that, you know, we have to make our food beautiful. Like it's creating that change up in the human existence that I think is just, you know, something that we don't think about very often because it's so bizarre, but it is really a human thing, as opposed to, you know, leaves falling off the tree, these things that we can rely on that are just going to happen around us. It's what we do as humans to make bigger and more beautiful these monotonous routines that are just a part of life.
Absolutely. And I like, as Michael brought up, you know, or both of you brought up the miniature temple and the gas station, the neon line. She's using the modern world in this spiritual way, and how, you know, we're always sort of there. The grocery store becomes this sort of spiritual place. That reminds me a little of, now I think about Don DeLillo's White Noise. I don't know if you guys have ever read that novel. He kind of does something like that. How like consumerism, all, you know, all of this stuff almost becomes like, this takes on this weird spiritual element. You know, on one hand, it's like a critique of consumerism, but on another hand, it's also becomes like our way of expressing something.
I think there's a bit of like that we're comfortable in things that are predictable as well. And you know, that neon sign, you know, for anyone who's lived in a city and has walked home late at night, you know, there is a certain comfort in that predictability of just knowing that it's going to be there. You know, maybe it's a metaphor of God, maybe it's not, I don't know, but I think it is that we kind of seek that comfort, you know, even though we're, you know, we don't want life to be boring and tedious and routine. We're always trying to switch it up, but yet we also still really do rely on that predictability. I mean, we do it in our poems with meter and rhyme, and, you know, even the you know, the line breaks or the spaces in the lines themselves. Like there's something when we like approach our poems that's like, so we're creating that predictability that we know is going to happen and we rely on it. But at the same time, you know, we want the surprise too. And I think it's, you know, she does such an awesome job with managing that tension between the predictability of monotony in life and also the fact that we just, you know, that we're trying to do whatever we can to add our own embellishments and comforts and that sort of thing.
So I'm glad you brought up like meter and rhyme in poetry. I'd like to talk a little bit about that because our anonymous listener has something to say about this poem, which I'd love to read. So there's a simple beauty about the Malena Morning poem I find admirable. It has a lovely looseness that allows the poet to discover each small turn as it's being written. It's incredibly human. My issue, though, is that a poem must sing, and this poem doesn't sing. It's prosaic without any, if at all, rhythmic or syncopated texture, no percussion, no syllabic play. The imagistic quality is lovely, but not original enough to carry its lack of music. So I'm wondering, what do you think about the musicality in this poem? Is it necessary? Is it not? Like when listening to Clint read the poem and having read the poem and things like that, I think there are a lot of things as far as like line breaks and things like that that work really well for me. There is that rhythm for me where there's end stop lines versus, you know, in jammed lines and things like that. So I think there is a musicality at play and enough linguistic play that makes it interesting. And even without some of the more like technical or lyrical or whatever you want to call it parts of this poem, I think it works as a poem. I don't think every poem needs to quote unquote sing in the ways that I think the listener is thinking.
I guess we need this anonymous listener to step forward and just clarify what they mean, because like, are they talking about you know, rhyme and that sort of thing, or is it, because to me like the message sings?
Yeah, I don't really follow what they're saying either as far as that goes. I see there's a lot of musicality in this, and you know, not every poem needs to be a bunch of linguistic play either, right? Just like great songs move you, and that's what matters, right? That's what sings, as Kate says, right? It's not, you know, sometimes you listen to some experimental music, but other times you just put on a song that's C to D and whatever, simple a Beatles
Yep.
song or something like that, and it can be just as powerful and moving, and so that sounds a little just sort of over academic to me, and not really what I like in poetry anyway.
Well, yeah,
What I-
some of the best Bob Dylan songs are really just like the chords C, D, and G. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it seems like a bit of an archaic sort of argument, like a textbook. It sounds like a textbook argument to me.
I think sometimes there can be that confusion between what is complicated as musical or what is, if something is complicated or a little bit more, I don't even know, just decorative, it can be viewed as being academic and smart and interesting, which I don't necessarily think is the case. I think, Clint, you had mentioned something about that kind of simplicity of this poem, and I think about and how academia can overcomplicate simple things. And I think about like old school Chinese paintings where you have these just brushstroke mountains and forests, and they're very simple, but they're beautiful and elegant. And I think there's that kind of simple elegance in this poem that speaks volumes that can, if someone else tried to write this in a different style, could just overcomplicate it, and just the message itself, the whole beauty of the poem would be lost.
It's kind of interesting to me, and I don't mean to keep like coming back to this idea of monotony, but if you think about it, like music, it relies on the same patterns as poetry or anything or any other kind of art, where there's a little bit of a mathematical equation to it, and it's we rely on that routine, that sort of monotonous thing. We put that into our poems. However, whatever devices we're deciding to use is, let me put it this way. Even if you turn on the radio, right, and you're driving, there's a good chance you're going to listen to the same, like one of the top 40 songs, like 5 times in your 20-minute car ride, that because people want to hear the same thing over and over again. If it sparks something in them, we love that routine. We want to revisit it again and again. And I think that this poem, whether or not it sings and it's on its face, it's not necessary. It's the larger message, I think, that's being projected out of what it is like to be human in these sort of mechanical things of just existing. It's just, I get more of that as a message out of the poem, whether or not I think, there's a lovely line in the middle that just is really beautiful to read, kind of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and how sometimes, and rightfully so, every time I read it, I get more out of it. I got something different out of it or whatever, which is great, and can be great on an academic level. Certainly academics would love that, because the more complicated a poem is, the more they can write about it. And, but I was thinking that sometimes you just revisit a poem to experience it again, just like a song, like a song that you like, you don't necessarily listen to it to get something different out of it. You listen to it to re-experience what you got out of it in the first place. And I think sometimes poets, or we over intellectualize some of this stuff, when it's actually about the experience of the work itself. I will say, having thought about it for this discussion, I too started to get a little bothered by some of the early parts, thinking what other people might, instead of just experiencing it like I did. Even when I was reading it, I was like, okay, I wonder, but ultimately, I think where this ends up is, really, I find it just very moving.
The phrase "food store" is
Yeah.
great. It always kind of trips me up, but it's
It
kind
does
of
me too,
just
yeah.
a curious little phrase, the food store, which is, that is very accurate. I've just never heard anyone call it that, but it's great though, in a way, because like I said, there's that ability to make the familiar seem a little bit strange, and whether that's just a phrase that they came up with or a phrase that they've heard or whatnot, I don't really know. But at the same time, I do like it because it kind of pulls me out a little bit and makes me look at things a little different, just like what the author does with the bedrooms. It's like, and like you said, Clint, entire rooms. It makes it its own kind of like church or temple, in a way, where you have this like enshrined room where that is all you do. And it's true. I don't who spends time in the bedroom? I mean, other than to just go and collapse. And that's why my bedroom is like perpetually
Well, I
messy.
mean,
Kate's like, I'm in there for.
I'm going there as soon as this ends. I think it's more like the absurdity, right? Like it's just sort of commenting, like we're, by saying food store, like it's just like, that so much of our it's just so absurd. I think someone on Facebook made that comment about the poem as well, that it's just kind of commenting on the like absurdity of just, what it's like to just be alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I was a kid, and sometimes I would just be like, what the hell am I doing? Well, who am I? What am I doing on this planet? And like, it just kind of draws attention. It zooms in on these small everyday life events, and just what are we doing here on Earth? And we're gonna die, and we're in line at the food store, and we sleep in these entire rooms. Why do we do this? What is all this? The absurdity of all of existence in some way.
The line that's been brought up, we are always looking to acquire more food for more great meals. We have to have great meals, like this strange like rat race that we can get caught up in, and just this acquiring these things that really, on the grand scheme of things, like we're all gonna die. Like, oh, it really doesn't matter that I had this delicious roast duck or whatever the crap, it's so strange. And it really is. I like that pulling out. And then the list of items, the carton of milk, package of butter, loaf of whole wheat bread. It's just the most bare, basic grocery items that you could buy now, or you could have bought 100 years ago, basically. Yeah, so it's so great. I love that making everything just so simple into its like core essential elements is something that the poem does.
I feel like we really did a terrible job of building the suspense of where we all stand on this poem, but we do have to come down on our whether we toast or roast.
Yes, we do.
So,
all right, Clint, do us the honors.
We know.
Starting
we know
off
where I am, so I toast this poem.
Kate.
Oh, those first few lines, they were tough to get through, and I do feel like there was a comma that should have been put in there at one point at that beginning, but for the larger picture and the greater themes and everything that we talked about, I too must toast this poem. Michael's gonna throw it in the
and no shock for me here. I think the poem in its simplicity, I don't think it should be changed to add more quote unquote music. I don't think it really needs any more syllabic play or any of that stuff. I think there's something very simple and complicated at the same time. I think it's beautiful the way it is. I love that ending, so I must toast it as well. It's a poem that, like Clint said, I think you said it so well, is that when I reread it, I get the same thing I got the first time. It doesn't need to open up into some whole rabbit hole that Kate likes to go down. It is what it is, and there's something wonderful about that, and I like what it does. It's like revisiting an old friend or something. It is comforting, and it is there, and it is consistent and reliable, and I really like the poem. So cheers to Simply Lit by Malena Morning from the book Astoria out of University of Pittsburgh Press back in 2006.
Yeah, I mean, accessible is a bad word sometimes for people, and I don't understand that. I mean, yeah, this is definitely accessible for those who don't read poetry, as you said. And, maybe actually more people might like poetry if
if this was, because this isn't the type of poem people think of. If you're a non-reader and you're like, oh, I write poetry, they don't think a poem like this that they're gonna understand upon first reading. Like there isn't, like they're gonna think it's something that they're just not quote unquote smart enough for or won't be able to relate to. And it's not true if you find these great poems like this.
I like this poem. It's very complimentary to the poems that Clint was reading from his new book. Just that way of just kind of offering up a very simple simple doesn't do a good, it doesn't say simple, it's doing a disservice to the larger ideas that sort of come up out of the text itself.
I don't think simple is a bad word. I mean, we use it that way sometimes, but I think to describe artists simple. Well, I mean, the style of it is simple, right?
The language is strict. There's no ornamental language. It's not the classic lyrical poems that we see so often. And Michael and I are very I think we both would admit that we kind of lean lyrical when we write.
I think for both all three different styles, it is finding that balance to not tip too far. Like, you could tip too plain spoken, too flat, too boring, It's always like trying to find that balance no matter what.
It feels like a jazz solo sometimes, where it's like there's enough recognizable notes in there that you're carrying that main theme from the song, and then sometimes when you cross the line, when you're like, I'm parodying myself, I don't make any sense anymore. Like, you just have to cut entire chunks out because you're just like, you fall into your own voice so hard that it becomes mockable. And there are lots of times in the revision process where I'm like, a reader is not going to follow this. Like, I've just gone off by myself. Like, the audience has left and I'm sitting there like playing the trombone all by myself in the studio. It's like no one's. And there's that, like you said, you want to have that balance between what is lyrical and what is simple, but at the same time, it is hard.
I think that's the kind of thing that's just so impossible to teach. It's just something like you just can't.
And as writers, like you practice and you read a lot and you revise, and your chance of hitting that balance gets higher and higher, but you can't, like you said, you can't quite articulate what makes it work all the time, like, or else we'd be rich and famous. But no, sometimes a poem is done and it still doesn't hit that.
But no, we're not rich and famous. So it reminded me.
And we never will be.
So, Kate, did you have a poem picked out for our next episode? We're taking a little hiatus next week because of the holidays, but
Yep. Okay, I'm not gonna say too much because we're running out of time anyways. But I did pick a poem, and I don't have much reason. I don't know why I picked it. Maybe because it has the word monotony in it, and I've said that about 1,000 times in this episode. But it's Emily Fragos, and the poem's called Nemesis. And you can find it on the Poetry Foundation website. I'll put the link in the notes. It was first published in Poetry Magazine in 2007. It appears in her collection called Hostage, which is a new selected collection. So kind of going with that whole, not thematic, but it's just a pile of poems. Sheep Meadow Press, 2011.
Sounds good. All right. Well, if you have a differing opinion about Simply Lit, feel free, once again, email us. You can be anonymous if you'd like. We would love it if you weren't, so that you can maybe join the conversation. So email us at tableforDeuce@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, buy Clint's book, Visitor, out from New York Quarterly Press. It is a good book. I finished it this morning, 5 stars. If you like Simply Lit, you are going to like Clint's work. It is simple, but not shallow. It has its moments of lyricism, even though he might not think so, but they're in there. And it is a poem it is a book that you're going to be able to sit with and reread and enjoy on multiple levels. So, but yeah, if you comment on the video, I would be happy to send a copy of Clint's book, and Kate has a copy to send as well. So like, subscribe, comment, and let us know what you think, and you can get Clint's book. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Clint, for being our first guest on the show.
Yes.
We had such a great time.
Thanks for having me. Your biggest fan, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Till next time, everybody.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, but I don't have much. I mean, I don't have anything smart to say.
Storm. The storm is coming.
Oh my gosh.